can't get no satisfaction. I can't get no girly action. 'Cause I tried, yeah I tried, yes I tried, yeah I tried. Hi, I'm Zach Morgenstern. Welcome to Close Listening. I'm joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. So as I said in my last video, my New Year's resolution for this year, which I just completed, was to listen to all the Rolling Stones albums to date. And now I'm going to make a video quickly and not too deeply ranking them, just to sort of celebrate finishing that. So let's get right to it and start with our number 24. In our present life, so please carry the lantern high. Yes, they're Satanic Majesties, one of the few Rolling Stones albums that I made a video about. This was one where the cover was a lot more exciting than the record. The one thing I'll say with this one is it produced one real hit, She's a Rainbow, which is just beautiful with its piano playing. And one temptation when listening to it is to think, oh, I underrated this one because there are more good songs in it than She's a Rainbow. There's that one I just quoted there, Lantern, which is sort of an interesting mix of parts, and it's catchy in lots of its parts. In the Citadel is not bad. It kind of sounds like something off of David Bowie's The Man Who Sold the World. You got Bill Wyman singing a fine song called In Another Land. And the opener, it's kind of, Beatle-y in a Rolling Stones kind of way. Why don't we sing this song together? But the lows on this one are just so low, and the songs go on for so long, and they really don't need to, and you can tell this was just a bit of a drugged out mess of a record. So my not too controversial opinion, number 24. Where the boys go Saturday night, where the boys go, hold me tight, where the boys go Saturday night, where the boy'll go. Right, so my number 23 is Emotional Rescue. This is a record from, I believe, 79. So the Rolling Stones have been around for a while, and they're really transitioning from just famous British invasion band to world's greatest rock band. But the problem is just the rock energy has gotten so much that it's suppressing any possible melody. You can barely hear Mick singing on a lot of the songs. And then the one exception is the title song, Emotional Rescue, where Mick is singing a lot in falsetto, but, it's not the soaring, beautiful arrangements of the Bee Gees, right? It just sounds kind of like a gimmick that he's singing in falsetto. So I thought the vocals came out just strongly enough on a couple of the rockers, Summer Romance and Where the Boys All Go. So, nothing bad here. There's the only one we're really going to beat up on is their Satanic Majesties, but sometimes you really need the melody to rise above the rock and roll to make songs memorable and interesting. She was hot as she kissed my mouth. She was hot as I wiped her brow. She was hot. She pinned me to the ground. She was quick. She knew her way around. She was hot as she tore off my clothes. She was hot. She had no place to go. She was hot on a cold and rainy night. So that's about all I really have to say about the album Undercover. Again, very much from a hard rock, not trying to make things that are so beautiful, Rolling Stones kind of period. And then songs from that period work best, I guess, when you have a simple, direct, sometimes too simple lyric like She Was Hot, but didn't really remember any of the other songs of that record. So that's 22 on my list. I'm just your fool, can't help myself. I love you, baby, and no one else. Well, I ain't crazy. You are my baby. I'm just your fool. So number 21 on my list is the one that I just reviewed, Blue and Lonesome. And the fact that it's on the lower side of the list really shouldn't be taken as a slight, because this was an album they put together very quickly. As I said, the Stones were just having fun playing some of the songs they loved. And how quickly they were able to put together a decent album with that stuff and, still not be at the lowest on the list you know, that's a good sign. At the end of the day, this was an album made by people who love the blues, and I'm someone who has mixed feelings about the blues, and the album's gonna get repetitive for you unless you're like a real blues fan. You love every single one of their selections, but it certainly brings out some of the natural passion and talents in Mick as an expressive singer and the rest of the band jiving together. Charlie gets some nice, simple drum solos in there. I certainly like to listen to the drums in Stones songs these days, even though I'm not a drummer myself. It's sort of easy to appreciate what Charlie's doing in producing this rootsy blues sound.
With no loving in our souls and no money in our coats, you can't say we're satisfied. But Angie, I still love you, baby. Everywhere I look, I see your eyes. But Angie, ain't it good to feel alive?
So that is Angie, one of the most beautiful songs that the Rolling Stones ever wrote. I played it when I was briefly in a band with a guy named Luis Lopez a few years ago. And so I saw it was on this album called Goat's Head Soup. Great album title, often accompanied with memorable album art. And the Stones re-released it last year, so I was expecting it to be one of their more interesting albums. But it kind of comes across when you listen to it like they're out of ideas. So the opening track is a song called Dancing with Mr. D, and it just feels like a poor man's version of Sympathy for the Devil. Style-wise, this is not an example of the Rolling Stones just going pure hard rock and being too loud at the expense of melody. They're trying with different sounds, some slow ballads, some blues, but other than Angie, there's nothing really memorable on here. Well, there is one which is a bit too memorable that they couldn't even put the name in the title. Cause you're a stop, 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 stop. Yeah. Star.
Stop me up. If you stop me up, I'll never stop. Running hots. If you stop me up, you'll never stop and never stop and never, 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 never. You make a grown man cry. You make a grown man cry.
Yep, so number 19 on my list is Tattoo You. So I ended up ranking two albums that are being re-released around the same time right next to each other. Now, my understanding is Tattoo You is quite a favorite, but I have to suspect that's just because people really like the opening track. There's a bit of variety with the end track, one of the songs that did get a music video, Just Waiting on a Friend. So it's a different sound, but it doesn't do anything special. There is one other song I like on this one. It's the second track. It's
Hang fire. Hang fire. Do 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 do. We hang do 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 do. Hang fire. Hang fire. Do 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 do.
So that one was a little bit memorable, but overall, this album was a lot of hard rock noise with obviously a very memorable first track and a pretty good second track.
You better get some sleep tonight, baby. You better get some sleep tonight. Ooh, they say you watch the sun go down. The shame or shadows all over town.
So Get Some Sleep Tonight, it doesn't seem to get any concert play, but I think of the songs that are really Keith Richards songs, you know, that he probably wrote by himself and that he's doing the singing on. This one is so unequivocally beautiful. He comes across a bit sounding like Tom Petty here, except he's in his own little smoky room with just his acoustic guitar. So this song doesn't really get its dues. The album, Dirty Work, number 18 on my list. seen as kind of a low point for the Stones because, again, Keith and Mick weren't really getting on. And indeed, much of the album is kind of forgettable, but that last song is absolutely beautiful, and they have a great hard rocker at the beginning. One hit to the body, and one more straight to the heart, straight to the heart, something like that. So a great beginning and a great end, and to me, those songs are enough to put it, not so low on this list, despite the reputation. And great photography on the album cover. Great arrangement on the album cover, whatever that counts for.
Close my eyes. It's 3 in the afternoon. Then I realize that she's really gone for good. Has anybody seen seen her around?
So that was from Bridges to Babylon, another one I'd like to love because it has an inspired album cover. And though I don't love it, I feel like it's reasonably high up on the list for such a late career effort. There's a great diversity in what the songs sound like, at least, even if none of them really sticks in your head as your favorite. You can tell they're all inspired. They're trying to do things different. It got a bit messy towards the end. I think this is one of the ones where I didn't like the Keith song as much. But yeah, this is in the category of solid throughout. It's a pleasant surprise.
Do you ever feel the pain that he felt upon the cross? Did you ever feel the knife tearing flesh that's oh so soft? Yeah, you're blinded by rainbows, watching the wind blow. Blinded by rainbows.
So Blinded by Rainbows was a real pleasant surprise for me. So this is from the Voodoo Lounge album, and I guess we're at number 16 on my list, so starting to get around the middle. So this is the first album recorded after Bill Wyman, so I guess you could say it's the beginning of the modern Rolling Stones, and I've heard it cited as a memorable album. It was the subject of a concert video, though the concert itself I don't think includes very many songs from the album. What I really liked about this one is that for the first time in a long while, the Stones weren't limiting themselves to being like an edgy, loud band, and there were, a few really memorable songs in there. New Faces and Blinded by Rainbows that sort of sounded like one of the slower songs in the same vein as Angie. Mick is just genuinely very expressive in his voice. So there's certainly a range of sounds on here. Overall, it's a Stones rock album, but there's some exceptions to that pattern.
It's liberty for all. Just democracy's our style. Unless you are against us, then it's prison without trial. But one thing's certain, life is good at Halliburton. If you're really so astute, you should invest in Browning Roots. How come you're so wrong, my sweet Neocon?
So this one I'm actually filming on a different day. I realized I forgot to record a response to this one, A Bigger Bang, and I don't know why this one slipped my mind because I listened to it pretty recently and I thought it was pretty decent. I guess this one is sort of in a weird period where it's years after Bridges to Babylon, but years before Blue and Lonesome, so it's kind of like the Stones had slowed down, but there was still so much more to go. It was from 2005, which feels like the distant path, and it's unsurprising that the song that really made the album stand out to me was a rare, pretty explicit protest song against the Bush administration and probably the Blair administration as well, and specifically the handling of the war in Iraq, called Sweet Neocon. And after that song, I felt like some of the songs that came after it just felt like they had more energy sort of jumping off of it. So Look What the Cat Dragged In also has some political connotations. And then the opener, Rough Justice, I thought was pretty good as well as Biggest Mistake. So this is quite a stripped down album. It's not quite back to the basics like Blue and Lonesome, but they're also taking off some of the excess of the hard rock edge from their previous albums and sort of going back to that very simple guitar riffs and harmonica and drums kind of sound. And so it lacks some of the beautiful songs that some of the earliest albums have, but it's the Stones just more working to their natural talents, and it's a pretty good album as a result.
I want a real fine car, fly to Miami too. All the rum, I wanna drink it, all the whiskey too. I'm working so hard, I'm working for the company. I'm working so hard to keep you in the luxury.
Next on my list, we are up to number 14, It's Only Rock and Roll. So this is an album before the Stones have really gone in hard on the hard rock and roll stuff, but only just before. So it doesn't quite have the creative variety of the 60s stuff either. It has this very ambitious album cover, and supposedly there was some rivalry between Mick and David Bowie over this, because I think David Bowie saw the cover and then he asked the same artist to do the art for his Diamond Dogs record. Both interesting, memorable pieces of art. I don't think it had to be a competition. That said, the fact that the only song on this album to have really lasted It's Only Rock and Roll is, lyrically more on the generic side of the Stones hits. It's, we're a rock band and we like playing rock and roll, and it is a fun music video of them in sailor suits getting covered in bubbles. But again, this is an example of an album that has a lot of great, but maybe not a true favorite unless It's Only Rock and Roll is your thing. But that song I played, Luxury, was a pleasant surprise. I remember also liking If You Really Want to Be My Friend. And then there's Short and Curly's, which is a catchy little bluesy number, if you don't mind slightly crude language.
You're just a memory of a love that used to be, and it used to mean so much to me. She's got a mind of her own, and she used it well, yeah. She's one of a kind.
Memory Motel is perhaps the most beautiful thing on the Stones album, Black and Blue. The one that seemed to stand the test of time more is Fool to Cry, I guess because it has some memorable falsetto singing riffs. I guess Mick really likes doing that. But this one feels like the more complete song. So Black and Blue is surprisingly high on the list because it's essentially a jam record. It was sort of made while the Stones hadn't fully replaced Mick Taylor with Ronnie Wood, and I guess they're a real band, so they need all the sort of core parts there to make a record. They can't just write songs and have the studio fill in the rest. So some of the songs like Hot Stuff and Cherry, whatever it's called, a kind of reggae song, they sound sort of more like riffing around in styles than full songs. But Memory Motel for me is absolutely a classic, and the album is overall pleasant to listen to. They're showing good range, good expression. Really not bad considering the circumstances it was created under.
I just can't be seen with you. I admit it anyway.
So that was one of the highs I remember from the Steel Wheels record. And I kind of had a reaction to this one, like some of the things lower on the list, like Bridges to Babylon, where it was enjoyable to listen to, but maybe the songs weren't sticking so much in my head. And fair enough, and maybe that happens with all songs that aren't, subliminally in the background for you. But when I was listening to this one, I just wrote down so many as gotta listen to this later. So Rock in a Hard Place would be an example. Slippin' Away, which is another Keith standard to do in concert, so I really don't get why he prefers that one to Sleep Tonight from Dirty Work. Steel Wheels is the overall stronger album, but I feel like the album that came before it, Dirty Work, its opener and its closer are just amazing, and I really don't understand why those haven't become Stones classics. But regardless, Steel Wheels has a lot of, B+, A- style Stones tunes that you won't want to forget after hearing them. Love Comes at the Speed of Light, Mixed Emotions, and they're very much still in their hard rock phase, but there's also some 80s production, some like accenting synths in there, just making songs like Rock in the Hard Place resonate all the harder when you hear them. They sort of make you, want to bang your head, though do that carefully, don't cause any head damage.
Was a common flirty, she looked about 30. I would have run away, was on my own. She told me later she was a machine operator. She liked the way I held my microphone. She said, my, like a spider to a fly, jump right ahead of my web. So I'm finally getting to a very early Stones album out of our heads, and this is a bit of a problem. I was largely taking these albums out of the library. Sometimes they had American albums, sometimes they had British albums. Some of these album titles would only occur in one country, and sometimes the track listing was different. So this is one of the messy parts of making this list, but honestly, this is just a fun, appreciate the Rolling Stones kind of video. I hope no one gets picky about what the definitive version of this one is. Of the early Stones albums, I feel like, other than the fact that this one had Satisfaction on it, it probably had the fewest high points. Kind of like with Blue and Lonesome, I think sometimes the blues and early rock songs the Stones choose to cover are underwhelming unless you're really, really in love with the genre. So there were perhaps the fewest exciting points on this record, but obviously Satisfaction, perhaps the greatest tune the Stones ever wrote, and then Spider and the Fly, a great example of silly blues lyrics. Let's drink to the hard-working people. Let's drink to the lonely of birth. Let's drink to the good and the evil. Let's drink to the salt of the earth.
So now we're into our top 10, and we're into Beggar's Banquet, which, could be some people's #1 Rolling Stones album because it introduced 2 classic songs.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste.
Sympathy for the Devil and Street Fighting Man. Now, my problem here is that the arrangements of those on the record just don't quite do it for me. In the case of Street Fighting Man, Mick's voice is so low in the mix, and it's a slightly weird tune as is, so it just sounds like a mess of sound. Even though it's a good lyric, it's one of the Stones' first examples of a sort of politically music song, and it's a great rousing one, which they open their shows with. Sympathy for the Devil, I feel like the drum circle sound is a bit too strong in the mix, and it just goes on too long, and it sort of emphasizes the repetitiveness of it. And it's a song that really relies on Mick's personality, so it may just be a better tune for live performance than it was on the original record. Now, there's some good variety on this album. There's a Bob Dylan-esque song called Jigsaw Puzzle, and there's that song Salt of the Earth, which, is a bit simple for a folk protest song, but still certainly plenty pleasant to listen to, especially when you hear Keith's voice at the beginning. It's the first time that hearing Keith's voice really stood out to me, and I like how they just give Keith a little solo before, deferring back to Mick's bigger, more straightforwardly catchy voice. But they really shine a good light on Keith with this one. So an album with some good range on it, but I just question some of the production choices. And when you squander your 2 strongest songs, then you're left with your weaker songs, some of which are just, not the most exciting things.
Never be your beast of burden. My back is broad, but it's a hurting. All I want is for you to make love to me and never be your beast of burden. Walk miles, but my feet are hurting. All I want is for you to make love to me.
Beast of Burden, perhaps a better title than the song itself, but it's still plenty beautiful to listen to. And Some Girls is very much the Rolling Stones hard rock period, yet there's still a nice variety in the sound, with the disco We Miss You at the beginning, with Beasts of Burden. And then the kind of silly updated version of Ricky Nelson's Traveling Man, Some Girls, which, you know, of course is kind of low-key sexist, so you just have to interpret it in kind of silly, immature light. Great album art and a very diverse album. It starts to be the kind of one that I would recommend to people for enjoying the Stones, so we're not quite at my real highlights on this list.
I live in an apartment on the 99th floor of my block. And I sit at home looking at the window, imagining the world has stopped. Then in flies a guy who's all dressed up like a Union Jack. And it says, I've won 5 pounds, fat is kind of detergent pack. I said, hey, you get off of my cloud. Hey, you get off of my cloud. Hey, you get off of my cloud. Off of the cloud bar. Choose a crowd, my cloud.
That song's a surprisingly hard one to sing. But anyway, we're up to number 8 on the list, which is December's Children and Everyone Else's. So in the order I ended up listening to, the awkward mix of American and British releases, this is the 4th one, and it starts to be a one that, while it does of course has some blues standards on it, it has a decent amount of Mick and Keith compositions, and a lot of them fall into the category of good, not great. You have the singer, not the song. I'm Free, I mean, Get Off My Cloud is great, and there's As Tears Go By, which is the first memorable, genuinely beautiful songs they wrote. The only problem with it is that the lyrics are a bit simple, so Mick has to stretch out these short syllable words, so that kind of frustrated me with it at first, but I have come to appreciate its place as, you know, one of the early beautiful songs in the Stones canon.
This low down pitching, now my both feet are itching. You know that this deuce is too wide. Oh, oh, baby, I can't stay. You gotta roll, roll, roll me. Call me the tumbling dice.
So number 7 on my list is Exile on Main Street, and this is one that a lot of people hail as the greatest Stones album, and I honestly don't get it, but I think it's a case where they made a double album, and if you condense it down to the best parts and into a single album, then I would start to get it a bit more. They certainly had a lot of catchy songs on here, playing with both blues and gospel and sometimes even country sounds. So you have the Tumbling Dice, you have Rocks Off, which starts with a great little riff. You have Sweet Virginia, which, I don't know, is kind of directly crude. I don't like the line about wiping shit off your shoe. And to be clear, that's an aesthetic thing. It's not that I don't say swear words or whatever. But, you know, overall, it's still a pretty catchy song. And then there's apparently the most successful Keith song, Happy, and indeed the opening riff of it is quite memorable, though I don't think they quite get the vocals right in the mix. So there's a lot of good stuff on Exile on Main Street. It's just the album runs a bit long for me, which is why I rate it a bit lower than some of the others. But I kind of had a similar experience with it to Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life, whereas, you know, the double album thing maybe underwhelmed me. In the case of that Stevie album, I could certainly put together a best album all time if I just selected the best half, and probably true with Exile on Main Street, though I'm a bit less convinced.
Time is on my side, yes it is. Oh, time is on my side, yeah it is. Now you always say that you wanna be free, but you come running back to me.
The next one on the list, it's 12 by 5, which I believe is the Stones' second American album. That was the one I got my hands on. But I think no matter what, looking at the track listings for the awkward periods, that's the Stones' second and third albums, I think the conclusion you get is they're still making some of their best choices of blues and early rock songs to cover. They're singing songs that are beautiful and sometimes contrasting them nicely with the sharp edge in Mick's voice. So Time on My Side is memorable, the biting sound of Congratulations, and then there's the nice fun rocker of It's All Over Now.
What storm is threatening my very life today? If I don't get some shelter, oh, I'm gonna fade away. Whoa. away.
So Let It Bleed, we're now up to my number 5. So this is an album where it has 3 Stone standards on it. There's, of course, Gimme Shelter, there's You Can't Always Get What You Want, and there's Country Honk, which is actually Honky Tonk Woman. And I listened to it, and I didn't quite get it when I first listened to the album. It turns out they recorded a more country version and a more rock version, and the more rock version is the one why it's a hit. The country one, it's fine. You just listen to it and think, oh, they're just imitating a generic country song. But when you put it in the rock context, so I guess maybe I'm giving this one a bit of an extra credit because I'm treating Country Honk like it's Honky Tonk Women. A different production decision could have easily led to that. Outside of that, there's a lot of blues on this album. They really like a song called The Midnight Rambler, which, I don't know, to me isn't that interesting, but certainly between songs like Monkey Man and Let It Bleed, there's plenty of solid bluesy Stone stuff to enjoy, and then you have those 3 great songs. Again, I think You Can't Always Get What You Want is one that they mastered a bit in live performances, but it's perfectly enjoyable just listening to it on the record. And again, we're getting to the point now where I can really recommend these as records people add to their collection. This one certainly has memorable album art.
Childhood living, it's easy to do. Things that you wanted, I'd buy them for you. Wild horses couldn't drag me away. Wild horses couldn't drag me away.
So Wild Horses is one of the many good songs or great songs on number 4 on my list, which is Sticky Fingers. This is the first truly post-Brian Jones record by the Stones, and their second guitarist on this one is Mick Taylor. And I guess it makes their plaque at their list of names at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame kind of get a bit long because they have at least 3 secondary guitarists beyond Keith, and I guess it would be kind of historically nicer if, Brian had stayed around all along, or it was just Brian and Ronnie, or just Brian and Mick. But supposedly Mick was a really great influence on this album, and he helped keep them very melodic and ambitious in their composition, and he was a jazz guitarist. He went on to do some interesting things outside of the Stones, Mick Taylor did. But honestly, so many of the songs on this record are either, pleasant to listen to, like the very melodic Sway, or things that you really remember afterwards. So, of course, there's Wild Horses, there's Brown Sugar, which is, the beginning, perhaps, of the Stones' real hard rock period. You can barely hear Mick singing, and that's maybe for the better, because the lyrics are a bit risque. The way I hear it is he's sort of commenting on the hypocrisy of ruling society that tries to be all proper about sex and insist on race divides when white men back in the age of slavery were, having sex with black slaves. So obviously a very sensitive topic to sing about, so casually, probably something they wouldn't write today, and I certainly would never write, but you can sort of see what they're thinking of this one. And then if you just don't hear the words, it's a great rocker. You have Sister Morphine, a classic sad drunk anthem, kind of in the same vein. Awkward pun there is Neil Young's The Needle and the Damage Done. And they have another of my favorites, I think the best of their imitation country songs, better than Honky Tonk Woman or Sweet Virginia. It's called Dead Flowers.
Take me down, little Susie, won't you take me down? I know you think you're the queen of the undergrounds. You can send me dead flowers in the morning. Send me dead flowers or buy that U.S. mail. Send me dead flowers to my wedding, and I won't forget to put roses on your grave.
Like, it's a song that also has all these cliche country lyrics in it, but it just sounds so natural and original at the same time. Like, that was what was great about Bob Dylan. He wrote songs that both sounded like classic folk and were his own voice, and I think that's what the Stones unlock here with country. They write a lot of imitations of the country style, but I think Dead Flowers should really be their country staple, the song where they really nailed it.
I want you back again, and I want your love again. I know you tried so hard to reason with me, but this time it's different. Darling, don't you see? You gotta tell me you're coming back to me. You gotta tell me you're coming back to me. You gotta tell me you're coming back to me. You gotta tell me you're coming back to me.
So, of all the Rolling Stones albums where they have, they're playing a lot of blues covers, including the most recent Blue and Lonesome, like, it's a genre that they naturally gravitate to, and there are a lot of good songs on it. But what makes their first album, called, I think, officially just the Rolling Stones, but called in practice by its caption, England's Newest Hitmakers, such a stunner, where they really nail the landing, is breaking up the sound just once with one of the first, and the first on album, Jagger Richards compositions, Tell Me. It opens with this great little guitar part, but it's just this real showstopper. And then as for all the rock and blues selections on the albums, the Stones really add their own flavors to some of them. They really liven up Buddy Holly's Not Fade Away. They, bring out the Bo Diddley sound, and Willie Dixon's I Just Want to Make Love to You. And of course they play some already fun songs like Route 66 and Walkin' the Dog.
She would never say where she came from. Yesterday don't matter when it's gone. While the sun is bright, or in the darkest night, no one knows. She comes and goes. Goodbye, Ruby Tuesday. Who could hang a name on you when you change with every new day? Still, I'm gonna miss you.
So when a hard rock band goes beautiful, the contrast is just wonderful, just delicious. So whether it's Blinded by Rainbows, whether it's Angie, Wild Horses, Tell Me, As Tears Go By, whether you love the songwriting or you have issues with it, it's just wonderful to hear. And I feel like the Stones' real masterpiece in this regard is Ruby Tuesday. And that is on an album called Between the Buttons. So that has like two enduring hits on it, Ruby Tuesday and the cruder Let's Spend the Night Together, but it's a mild, innocent kind of crude. One of my favorite Stones moments is when they were playing it on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they were ordered to change the words to Let's Spend Some Time Together, and you can see Mick kind of rolling his eyes at the camera as he's singing the lyric. And it's kind of silly because the backup singing is still going, Let's Spend the Night Together. So Ed Sullivan was not very happy. Mick got a great TV moment out of it. But in addition to these two hits, which are quite different in their own right, the album just has a lot of boppy moments. There's Connection, which has been getting played a lot on the Stones' current tour. And there are a lot of songs where they just get to use very dramatic singing. So Who's Been Sleeping Here? I guess it's a kind of cartoonish reference to the Three Bears. Cool, calm, collected, she smiled sweetly. There are just so many wonderful moments of charisma on this album that, it's just pretty much all good songs, and then those two all-time greats in Ruby Tuesday and Let's Spend the Night Together.
I see a red door and I want it painted black. no colors anymore, I want them all to black. I see the girls walk by dressed in their summer clothes. I have to turn my head until my darkness goes.
So when picking a favorite album here, I pretty much just went to my list of reactions to the albums where I would just write down songs I wanted to remember. And it was really no competition because with Aftermath, I just put the whole album down. So the awkward thing here with the British versus the American edition, I believe I had the British edition, so it didn't actually start with that all-time great song, Painted Black, but it started with another pretty good song, Mother's Little Helper, which was a song about hypocrisy and how we talk about drugs and how, you know, proper housewives are allowed to use certain kinds of drugs to get through the day, but yet the drugs that bands were using were being put down. But just every song on this album is catchy in its own little way. So one song that stood out to me is I Am Waiting. A lot of people apparently say that that one's kind of weird. I almost didn't notice how weird it was, just because there's a great variety of songs on this album, but they're all 60s rockers, right? This is the Stones really at their best. There's Under My Thumb, where again the lyrics might be a little uncomfortable because it's someone being unhappy in their relationship, being like, I'm in control now, and if you take that too literally, obviously, you know, you don't want those levels of control. But it starts with this great, I believe, kalimba introduction, and it's just sort of catchy and punchy, and again has a really distinct sound like few other songs. Just so many songs on this album are memorable, distinct, catchy, and they have that rock and roll edge of the Stones, but they haven't gone into the hard rock sound they drifted into in the second half of the 70s and in the 80s, where the rock just dominates. Melody dominates here. And between Fly to Five, Out of Time, It's So Easy, and of course Painted Black, so much to quote here, so much to groove here, and that is my number one on this record. So I had a great year listening to a lot of Rolling Stones music. I got to revisit a lot of songs that I have known for years, but also discover plenty of fun new ones, and I enjoyed sharing this experience with you. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.